Hi, everybody. Welcome to Big Joe's Journal. Well, today is a sort of a special day. It took a while to get here, but this is show number 900. And as you know, we had the interruption of the pandemic, which kind of delayed things a little bit. So we finally, after a few months of delay and all that, and wondering if we're ever going to hit it, we finally reached 900. So it's, a time of decision. Where do we go from here? Well, considering my age and all the rest of it, 1,000 is within reach. But I'm going to chop it down and do it in sections. So we're going to be shooting now for 925. And the big thing is I want to be around when we have the big change in leadership on the 21st of January. Or I'm sorry, on the 20th of January, actually. And the new president will officially be the president of the United States at 12 noon on that day, or 1 minute after 12, according to the Constitution. And so I want to be around for that and watch the country take a step in the right direction and start getting back to normal. Start healing many of the problems that we've inherited in this 4 years of nightmare and horror that we've had. We watched our country start to come apart. We have an individual in the White House, as I always said, if you think Adolf Hitler was the greatest thing since sliced bread, then you got to love Trump. Because as far as I'm concerned, Trump is Adolf Hitler reborn. One of the things that used to surprise me back in the 60s, that many of the older Germans, and I lived in an area where many of my neighbors had served in the German military during World War II. In fact, my neighbor across the street, who was a math teacher, had been a U-boat commander. And he spent a large part of the war in a German U-boat off the coast of Maine, New Hampshire, and Long Island. And he and his wife, which they thought Hitler was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And I couldn't convince them otherwise. And say your country was destroyed because of this man. Look at the crimes that he committed against humanity, the things he destroyed. Well, they said, oh yes, but he invented an automobile. That's for sure. That's the Volkswagen. Volkswagen is German, for people's car. Translated in English, it's people's car. He built the Autobahn. Well, I don't know whether he built it or not, but it was built while he was being a dictator in Germany. He did build up German military strength right under the nose of the French, who were supposed to be overseeing the fact that he didn't. He was able to build up the German Navy, especially in U-boats and two large battleships, the Bismarck and the Graf Spee. And under Hermann Goring, who, something I found rather interesting, that in World War I, Hermann Goring was the number 2 German commander under the Red Baron. The Red Baron was finally shot down, and not by Snoopy, but by a Canadian pilot. And he crash landed in an area that was manned by troops from Australia and Belgium. And they gave him the day of his funeral, he was buried with military honors by the Australians. But that particular day that he was buried, there was just a temporary truce. As the Germans and the Aussies stopped shooting at each other, long enough to give the Red Baron a military funeral. Well, Hermann Goring was his assistant. the number 2 man in the German Luftwaffe at the time. And of course, as you know, Hermann Göring went on to be the builder of the German Air Force that was very, very effective at the start of World War II. He made the boast back in 1942 when the Germans were, especially 1940, 41, 42, when the Germans were very, very successfully bombing England, pretty good shape. And somebody said, well, what happens if the Americans get in and they retaliate and they start bombing us? And Göring made the boast, well, then you could call me Hademeyer. And of course, toward the end of the war, the German population were calling him Herr Meyer. As for Hermann Göring, for those of you that recall, and there probably aren't that many around anymore that do, but the Nuremberg war trials, Hermann Göring was convicted to be hanged, but he beat the hangman by committing suicide. He had in his mouth, and amazing that he was able to keep it there for so long, was a little capsule of cyanide. And of course, after he was condemned of war crimes and scheduled to be hanged by the neck, he committed suicide. Well, anyway, I was getting a little bit off track, going back into World War II. But there are many, many similarities. I know some of my other neighbors. There's one of my neighbors that had, I believe he served in the Gestapo, who had very, very little to do with myself and my late wife when they were there. And in fact, I think we'd only been there maybe a week or so, and he called and complained about my dog out barking. And so my dog's not out barking, and he went in kind of a rampage. And I said, my dog's right in here sitting beside me. He's not outside barking. But he never got along with that guy anyway. Well, the similarities between Donald Trump, who was of German heritage, by the way, and Adolf Hitler, very, very, very similar. I think if Trump had his way, and he did try to say that he was going to put off the election, postpone the election, and so forth, which he can't do. Excuse me. He claims power for the presidency which do not exist. His knowledge of the Constitution is totally blank. He's obsessed with power as long as it benefits him. You look at all the people that he has appointed, and then all of a sudden he is fired because they haven't been loyal to him. Very, very similar to Hitler. When Hitler did not trust an aide, he had him executed. The plot to kill Hitler toward the end of the war, when the plotters were rounded up, as you know, it failed. A bomb went off under the table, but with Hitler, it damaged one of his arms, but it didn't take him out, which was the intention of the young German officers that tried to do that. And of course, they were all convicted in the Gestapo-type court and were hanged. Today, as far as I know, there's only one of the old German clique that is still in prison. And I believe that is Rudolf Hess. And of course, Hess now, he must be pushing 100. And there's been some say, well, what's the point of keeping him in jail and keeping a guard on him all the time? So he's a harmless old man. But, well, for some reason, the Russians still want to keep him locked up. So it brings us back to 2020 and the campaign that we're having in 2020. A very unusual campaign due to the pandemic. COVID-19 that is ravaging the world. It seemed for a while that we were going to get a little control on it, that the numbers had gone down. Now all of a sudden they're spiking again. In Europe, in the Midwest, states like Wisconsin and Michigan, and of course, very, very high in Florida. You know, this past weekend, football game, college football game that was scheduled to be played at Florida was postponed, renewed, rescheduled for another date. The head coach of the University of Florida has tested positive. The head coach of the University of Alabama tested positive, and all of a sudden, 2 or 3 days, he said, well, he's going to have an assistant coach. Alabama was playing Georgia, a game that they won rather handily. But all of a sudden, he gets better real quick, and he's back on the sidelines, which maybe means an exchange of a few dollar bills might have helped his cure. The Big Ten has decided, well, they're going to play football again. They're starting the end of October. They'll have a very abbreviated season. It seems that it's economics that is making the decision. A lot of businesses in some of these college towns that have depended heavily on large crowds coming to a football game have been suffering without the attraction of that Saturday afternoon football game. So the Big Ten is going to come up with an abbreviated schedule beginning the end of October, running through November and probably into December. I think they're going to try to play about 8 games. So that would definitely take them right close to Christmas. And then probably have a championship playoff and hope to get a team in the Final Four that plays off for the national title. Things are changing. You see on TV the number of people that are lined up to vote, voting early. And this is something that probably should have started a few years ago. People are turning out to vote like they never have before. For people that are probably voting for the first time are turning out to vote. And what do we have? In the state of Texas, the Republican governor down there has said that there can be only one drop-off spot for early voters in each county, which has made it extremely difficult for a lot of people that want to vote early. Well, this was appealed to early court, and that ruling was overturned. But the governor appealed to a higher court, got a Republican judge that was sympathetic to him. So he held up the idea of just one box to drop your early ballots in for each county in the state of Texas. And of course, the Postmaster General, who was a big donor to the Trump campaign, did his best to try and slow down this voting by mail. He will succeed somewhat in some areas, but not as much as he hoped to succeed. Because Congress caught up with him and let him know that what he was trying to do was a little bit on the illegal side. And you've had the mass infection at the White House, the president violating a federal act that says you can't use federal property for political purposes, which he has been doing with these rallies he's held at the White House. And look at the number of people that have tested positive for COVID-19 and the way it has spread into the Pentagon, where all of our upper echelon in the military are now in quarantine. And you have to wonder about these mass rallies that old Dumbo is holding out through the country, and how many of those people are going to be affected, and how many are going to die. Well, the death total in the United States just since March is 217,000 and climbing. And chances are, with the holiday season coming up, people getting together for Thanksgiving, for Christmas, for New Year's, your New Year's parties. For those that have these parties, I think you're going to see the infection go up more and more and more. And especially with flu season coming in. For those of you that haven't got a flu shot, get one. Get a flu shot. we don't have any vaccination for COVID-19 yet, and probably never will for another year or two. So your best protection is to get a flu shot. And at least, be protected against the flu. Wear a mask when you're out in public, going grocery shopping. I know a lot of people don't like it. You go to church, wear a mask. Anything you've got to do with the public, any dealing with the public, if you have to deal with a group of people in any way, shape, or manner, wear a mask. See, in some areas, I saw on the news today where Oxbow Union High School up in Bradford has been shut down as I believe one teacher has tested positive. So they're going to play it safe and shut the whole school down. And kids' education is going to be disrupted, as are everything else, really. We're going to see a World Series that's going to be played in a huge stadium in Texas with very, very few people present. Those of you that watched the playoffs, Major League playoffs over the past couple of weeks, have seen these huge stadiums with all the empty seats and everything. And in the case of the American League, their playoffs took place in National League parks in California, San Diego and Chavez Ravine in Los Angeles, the home of the Dodgers. In the meantime, the National League, their playoffs took place in Texas. And of course, the World Series now is going to be played in Texas, and it's going to be between the LA Dodgers, back again, trying to make it this time, and the team with one of the lowest payrolls in Major League Baseball, and that's the Tampa Bay Rays. The Rays won Game 7 against Houston, and the Dodgers came from behind to edge the Atlanta Braves 4-3 to win the National League title. So it'll be the Dodgers and the Rays, and they're going to do it the way you'd play the World Series that were being done normally. First two games, the Dodgers, I believe, have had the better record, so they'll be the home team for the first two games. Games 3, 4, and 5, if necessary, Tampa Bay will be the home team. And 6 and 7, if it goes that far, the Dodgers will be the home team again. The games are all going to be played at the new baseball stadium in Dallas, Texas. And the only people there will be relatives of the players, their wives or their sweethearts or their kids and so forth. But the vast majority, there'll be security around the stadium. The vast majority that want to watch the World Series, we watch it on TV, and it'll be on Fox television. Same thing, you're watching pro football. You see all these empty seats. And you sometimes wonder about the players on the field. What these teams that are testing, where you have 3, 4, 5, 6, in the case of one team, 19 players testing positive for COVID-19. Well, football, by its very nature, is going to have people in contact with one another. Football's a contact sport, no question about it. And if it's going to spread, very easy to spread. You don't see many linemen or any running backs or quarterback wearing a facial mask. And it's surprising that more teams haven't come down and gone into quarantine. But 2020 is a year that things are going to change. Our outlook is going to change. We're going to be looking at an entirely different world from what we have known in the past. And I've said before on this TV show, and I'll say it again, we've got to take a look at our school year. Now, these kids that are supposedly watching at home on Zoom and computers and all that, they're not getting the education that they should. There's no way that is going to happen. They're being shortchanged. And we're going to develop a nation of morons. What you got to do is flip-flop the school year. Begin in March maybe the middle of March. Run it right through the summer, conclude around Thanksgiving or shortly thereafter. Much of your learning, much of your education is going to have to take place outdoors. Field trips, instead of being a rarity, will become a common factor in a child's education. There is no substitute for that relationship, that face-to-face relationship between a teacher and student, that person-to-person relationship. The idea of the teacher is not only to provide information, but to inspire the student. It's supposed to inspire the student to want to go further, to explore on their own, give them confidence that they have the capability of exploring on their own. You plant the seed, they develop it and carry it on from there. And that's not happening when you have kids watching it on Zoom or on their computer or whatever. It just doesn't, you get the information, but what do you do with it? The idea of the teacher standing in front of the room and lecturing, that's not going to happen. That's not going to work. Where you stand up there and you lecture and da-da-da-da-da, what about the kids? Kids are dozing off, going to sleep, daydreaming. Their minds are 1,000 miles away. You have to get them involved with that one-on-one, one-to-one contact. And this may be the opportunity to do it. You've got to change the way you teach, change the way the method you teach. It's got to be one-on-one. It's got to be personal experience. And you know, here in Vermont, schools in Vermont, especially if you're a history teacher, tremendous opportunity, especially on your field trips. There's so much history in Vermont, especially up in the Lake Champlain area. You got Fort Ticonderoga, you got Mount Independence, you got the Hubbard Battlefield, you got the Bennington Battle Monument, but actually that battle took place in Hoosick Falls, New York. You got the National Cemetery over at Saratoga, where many of the soldiers that fought at Saratoga, a number of our military heroes of the Revolution are buried there. There's Isle La Motte, probably the first white settlement in Vermont. It was French explorer Samuel de Champlain, his crew, came down from the province of Quebec, built Fort St. Anne at Isle La Motte as protection against the possibility of a British invasion coming north. On Champlain, of course, the French moved further south. They built Fort Ticonderoga. Oh, at the time it wasn't, they didn't name it Fort Ticonderoga. And what they named it, now right now I'm having a senior moment, it escapes me, but it became Fort Ti after the British captured it in the French and Indian War and gave it an Indian name, Ticonderoga. Mount Independence, that mountain in Orwell was known as Rattlesnake Mountain. But colonial troops built a fort up there to go along with Fort Ti as a protection against the British coming down from the province of Quebec. And of course, the summer of 76, 77, there was which we know now would have been the flu, hit that fortification up there. And many of these soldiers that were there died of the flu. The remnants of the old base hospital are still there. It was burned to the ground by the British when they captured it, but it's still there. And there are other remnants of the Revolutionary War. The Battle of Hubbardton. Field trip to the Battle of Hubbardton. And you see that most of the dead that are buried at Hubbardton are Hessians. In other words, German mercenaries that served under the British. Plus a number of colonial troops that were killed there, including Colonel Francis, who took over command when General St. Clair took the bulk of troops and retreated into Castleton and then down to Bennington to join Colonel Stark from New Hampshire and set up the mass movement that defeated the British at Hoosick Falls and would help later defeat them at Saratoga. Seth Gardner is not buried there, but he was the one that took over command of the Green Mountain Boys after Ethan Allen was taken prisoner of war on a failed colonial invasion of the province of Quebec, led by a General Montgomery. Benedict Arnold participated in that, but he escaped back to the States. But Ethan Allen spent most of the American Revolution as a POW. Primarily, he was paroled to Ireland. He was taken to England in a prison ship, and he was paroled to Ireland. So he spent much of the American Revolution entertaining the Colleens in beautiful Ireland. And as you know, he later, when he was returned to the U.S., he went back on a prison ship, brought back to the United States, and was paroled in New York. So we have all these golden opportunities here in Vermont. If you're teaching biology, tremendous opportunities. But this is the route we're going to have to go. Because I doubt very much that things, at least I know in my lifetime, are probably never going to go back to normal. This pandemic that is with us, it's like the flu, it's going to stay. Does it know a season? Apparently not. The word was, when we had it last spring, as soon as the weather gets warm, this will die down. But it never did. When it would die down in one area, it would shoot up in another. And of course, with the reopening of colleges in the fall, again, it took another spike. As these college kids got back, glad to see their old friends again, their girlfriends and boyfriends. And at that age, it's the big thing you want to do. You want to party. And they did. And of course, the idea of any safety precautions or wearing masks or anything else, that kind of went out the window. And the result was you had a huge spike in COVID-19 among your college students. Number of colleges, of course, cancel their fall sports schedules. The question now is, what are they going to do about the winter? And chances are, the way this thing is going, it hasn't calmed down any, it hasn't died out at all. Much of your college sports season will likewise be canceled. Because you can't put thousands of people in an auditorium with very poor ventilation and not expect this disease to spread. As you know, in situations like that, the flu would spread like crazy, especially in January, February, early March. And certainly as packing people into a gymnasium where you're not getting fresh air all the time, where the air is not being ventilated properly, it's just going to be more and more of an incentive to give this COVID-19 a huge, huge spike. Well, as we near the end of this 90th show, I want to urge you all to vote. I hope a lot of you have. And it doesn't make any difference who you vote for. Of course, I hope many of you will support Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. But one of the great privileges and one of the great things about our democracy is that we technically have control of our government, and we do it through our vote. We make a decision who our legislators are going to be, who our leaders are going to be. The people decide. And the people have to get involved. And I think this year we're getting involved more than any other year, which is great, which is a plus. So if you haven't voted and you don't want to go to the polls, then by golly, vote by mail or vote by absentee ballot. But exercise your right under democracy to vote. With that, may Almighty God continue to bless these United States of America. God love you. We'll see you all next week when we go from 900 to 901.